The Queen Without a Country. Holland wasn't the only country where Catholics and Protestants disagreed. Catholics and Protestants were fighting with each other all through Philip II's kingdom and all through the Holy Roman Empire, and even over in Scotland. Today, England and Scotland are part of the same country, the United Kingdom, or Great Britain. But at the beginning of the 17th century, Scotland was an independent country with its own royal court, its own laws, and its own queen. Mary, Queen of Scots, inherited the throne when she was only 5 days old. Because she was so young, her mother, Mary of Guise, became her regent. Mary of Guise would rule Scotland until her daughter was old enough to take the throne. Mary of Guise was a good regent, but she was Catholic, and many of the powerful Scottish noblemen called lords were Protestants who didn't want a Catholic ruler. So they formed themselves into a Protestant council and gave themselves the responsibility of governing Scotland until little Mary came of age. Mary of Guise was afraid that this council would try to make the baby queen into a Protestant. So when small Mary was 5 years old, her mother sent her to France, where she could be raised as a good Catholic among other Catholics. Mary of Guise remained in Scotland. She died a few years later without ever seeing her daughter again. Little Mary lived in France for the next 13 years. Meanwhile, the Protestant lords of Scotland grew more powerful. A Protestant preacher named John Knox traveled all through Scotland, preaching that no woman, especially a Catholic woman, should sit on the throne. It is a thing repugnant to the order of nature that any woman be exalted to rule over men, Knox declared. But Mary didn't agree. When she was 18, she decided to return to Scotland and take back her throne. Some of the Catholics who lived in Scotland hoped that Mary would march into Scotland with a French army and throw out all of the Protestants. But Mary announced that she didn't want to kill Protestants or Catholics simply because of their faith. She wanted to rule in Scotland as a good Catholic queen, but she intended to let her Protestant subjects worship in their own way. One hot August day, Mary set sail from France in a royal ship headed for Scotland. The Protestant Council of Lords met together at this alarming news. What would they do when the rightful queen landed? If they tried to drive her away, the Catholics of Scotland might take up swords to defend Mary against the Protestant lords. A civil war could begin. So when Mary's ship landed in Scotland, the lords went out to meet her and told her that she was welcome. John Knox refused to go with them. On the morning of her arrival, a thick, dim fog had descended on the Scottish coast. Mary, Knox snapped, was already bringing sorrow, dolour, and darkness with her. But when the lords met Mary, they were charmed. She was beautiful, intelligent, and sympathetic. They believed her when she said that she would never persecute the Protestants of Scotland. Mary even married a Protestant nobleman, Lord Darnley. For a little while her reign went smoothly. But then Lord Darnley decided that he wanted more power. He began to scheme with some of the Protestant lords who still hated Mary's Catholicism. They planned to shut Mary up as a prisoner in her own house and put Lord Darnley on the throne to rule in her place. Then Lord Darnley and the Protestant lords would make Catholicism illegal. When Mary found out about this plot, she crept out of the palace late at night through a tiny side door. She rode by horseback through the night to another castle where soldiers loyal to her gathered into an army. When the lords who were plotting against her found out about this army, they fled the country. And what about Lord Darnley? He decided to blame the whole scheme on the absent lords. When Elizabeth, Queen of England, heard about Lord Darnley's treachery, she remarked, "Had I been Mary, I would have stabbed Darnley with his own dagger." But Mary decided to pardon her husband. She was expecting a baby, and she wanted Lord Darnley by her side. But she never truly forgave her husband. One cold February night, after Mary's baby was born, Lord Darnley and his valet were staying in a small house in the Scottish city of Edinburgh. Mary, her new baby son, and the rest of the royal court were staying at a larger house in the same city. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Edinburgh was still and dark, until an enormous explosion shattered the quiet. Bits of stone and brick rained down on Edinburgh streets. Lord Darnley's house had blown up. When Mary and her attendants rushed over to see what had happened, they found Lord Darnley's body in the garden. He had been strangled. Who had arranged for Lord Darnley to die? No one knew, but plenty of people suggested that Mary herself had planned the murder. Mary became less and less popular, and as she lost influence, the Protestant lords tried again to take control of Scotland. They announced that her baby son, James, should become King of Scotland in Mary's place. Mary tried to assemble another army to fight against the rebels, but when most of her soldiers deserted her, she had to walk out on foot and surrender to the lords. The lords took Mary to a faraway castle in a wild and lonely spot. They visited her every day, telling her that she had to sign a paper that would make little James king in her place. Finally, with one of the lords holding her arm to force her to write, Mary, Queen of Scots, signed the papers. Her baby James was crowned King of Scotland at 13 months of age. John Knox preached at the ceremony. Mary fled to England, hoping that her cousin, Queen Elizabeth, would help her. But Elizabeth, who had no children, knew that Mary was her closest relation and the next heir to the English throne. She was afraid that Mary might arrange to have her assassinated and claim the crown of England. So she sent a band of soldiers to meet Mary, and had Mary taken to a comfortable house in the north of England. Mary remained a prisoner of the Queen of England for the next 19 years. Poor Mary! She had very little to do. She kept dozens of little dogs and birds as pets. She did a lot of needlework, and even sent some to Elizabeth as presents, along with indignant letters. As time went on, she began to plot her escape. Elizabeth's spies kept track of every letter she wrote, and every message she sent. Finally, the spies brought Elizabeth letters that Mary had written to a group of English Catholics. In these letters she spoke of becoming Queen of England if they could set her free. This could only mean that she was planning Elizabeth's death. Mary insisted that she would never harm Elizabeth, but Elizabeth, afraid for her life, signed Mary's death warrant for treason. On a cold February morning, Mary walked to the scaffold. She knelt down at the execution block and was beheaded. When the executioner held up her head, everyone could see that beneath her cap, her hair had turned pure white. Mary, Queen of Scots, was dead, and a Protestant king ruled in Scotland.